This is Major Ed Dames. Welcome to webinar number 1. We're going to be discussing what remote viewing is and isn't to a certain degree, giving you some beginner's tips, and I think you'll be quite intrigued when I talk to you about those things. I'd like to welcome all of you that are listening to this first webinar. If you're here, you either have the LearnRV DVD course now, or you want to learn it. You want to learn it correctly. So welcome aboard. My role and our relationship in the future, if we continue this relationship, is to make certain that you develop these skills correctly and effectively. If you go to the LearnRV DVD forum, then all of your questions, all of your problems can be posted there. This is where I teach in cyberspace, and I will meet you there day to day to help you along through this process. rvcommunity.net. That's where I am. That's where I and my instructors are. If you're having difficulty with the course, post your questions there. If you have questions about the course and you're not already a student, post your questions there. rvcommunity.net. I think it's important to note the history, the origins of remote viewing, modern day remote viewing as we know it today. Very rigorous, systematic approach to psychic performance. Remote viewing has its genesis as a military intelligence collection tool. At one point in my military intelligence career, I was tasked with collecting information about some of Russia's and China's most secret programs. And in spite of all the tools I had at my disposal, the intelligence collection tools, satellites, spies on the ground, all kinds of exotic things that I still cannot talk about, by hook or by crook, we could not solve the problems that needed to be solved. We couldn't collect the mail that needed to be collected, so to speak. As a tactic of desperation, we began to explore the possibility that very gifted psychics could provide us some insight, if not more, into the problems that we were faced with. Programs that were very, very classified in Russia and China, biological warfare programs, ICBM technology, particularly the SS-18 missile that the Soviets had developed, that was a juggernaut. This was the Satan, NATO codename Satan missile, and the U.S. really had no defense against this, nor did we ever, even at the end of the Cold War. But we still had to defeat it somehow, and in order to do that, my job was to collect intelligence against it, provide that intelligence to the U.S. Defense Department so we could develop systems that could defeat it or at least defend against it. Problems of that nature. It turned out that remote viewing, as we know it today, as it evolved, became really the key to penetrating these very highly classified programs to gain insight into the technology behind advanced biological warfare delivery systems and agents, in fact, identifying the agents themselves, the toxins, the bacteria, the viruses, and how the SS-18 missile worked, at least how it worked. Although we never developed a defense against it, we at least used remote viewing to get inside it and its the secret facilities that housed and developed it to determine how it worked. So that was 25 years ago. Since then, my continuous job has been to teach and to evolve this tool. The techniques that we employed in the military in the PSI spy unit were nascent. It was remote viewing that we took out of the laboratory, thank you very much, and my job was to develop remote viewing into a useful intelligence collection tool, one that could satisfy mission requirements. It's come a long way since then. Like anything else, skills evolve. Skills, techniques, and methods evolve. It's important to understand what remote viewing is and what it isn't. It's a very rigorous, precise tool. And indeed, remote viewing is a very rigorous, precise tool. It is not a free-flow psychic methodology. It's not something where you lay back, close your eyes, and visualize a target. Your eyes are wide open. Remote viewing is an attention management skill. You're sitting up straight, you're attentive, you're alert, pen in hand, and you go through a set of protocols that could be likened to a musical piece looking at sheet music. For us, our sheet music is the remote viewing structure, the protocols that have been developed and evolved over 25 years. These are the protocols that you're going to learn in the DVDs. The LearnRV methodology can be applied in almost any circumstance where unknowns exist. Has your cat gone missing? Has your wallet gone missing? Has your cat stolen your wallet? Where is it? The who, the what, the where, the how, and the why, the critical questions that we have in any problem-solving environment. For all intents and purposes, what remote viewing is structured ESP. It's systematic ESP. We take, I think everyone here, everyone listening to me now, would agree that all of us are born with some degree of psychic performance, some degree of innate psychic ability. What remote viewing teachers do, and what my job is to take this innate ability and turn it into a skill. Until the remote viewing protocol was discovered in the laboratory, and until it was developed as a military intelligence collection tool, we couldn't really use this ability in complex technical situations or in critical life or death situations. The model, the working hypothesis for how remote viewing really works is this. It is essentially a global mind, one mind. Your brain is an electrical oscillator, and while you're alive, it can tune or turn its attention to any pattern, a pattern of information. All things apparently exist as patterns of information in this global mind. That brain can tune its conscious attention, and unconscious attention follows, to any pattern of information within the matrix. All things exist as patterns of information within the universal mind. You, I, a star, ideas. So as remote viewers, we select the pattern that we're interested in, we hold on to it for as long as we desire, and we can hold on to a pattern as long as we desire if we stay within the remote viewing protocols that are taught. We can go back to that same target over and over and over again, anywhere in space-time, and download more and more and more detail about it, as much as we want. Obviously, in the military, we used, in this regard, and the PSI spy unit, we were very much interested in using remote viewing to describe the interior of, let's say, very top secret foreign facilities. And we did that effectively too. But we also use remote viewing to solve problems and answer questions that were not necessarily related with descriptive information. For instance, who was the particular assassin in a particular mission? Where is that assassin now? As all of my students know, there are no secrets for remote viewers. It's a world without secrets. And so I was interested in taking a look at the most secret Chinese military program, present day. So I turned my attention towards that. There are three parts of remote viewing. It consists of, number one, of orchestrating the collection effort, that is, setting up the proper search. Think of a Google or an internet database search. You need to have the right search term or search terms if it's a large project in order to download the information that you're interested in. So that's the first part of remote viewing. I set that up correctly in ways that my students are taught and know well. So I set about using remote viewing to gain an introspective look at China's most secret offensive weapons program. Now, of course, when I do this, or when you do this as a remote viewer, you may have all kinds of preconceived notions about what that might be. But as remote viewers, we know that once you put your pen on the paper and begin this process of data collection, that all those preconceived notions must go out the door, and we teach you how to do that. And so there I went, having defined the problem, started to remote view. Of course, prior to that, I was thinking of all kinds of possible new nuclear weapons or any number of different things. But I knew well enough as an experienced remote viewer that all those things have to go out the door. Only unconscious can solve this problem correctly. And so I began to allow it to do so. At the end of 45 minutes, because that's how long this particular project took, it was a very interesting picture emerged. There were no explosions, no nuclear mushroom clouds, no submarines. There were no particle beam weapons. There were no rifles. There were no masses attacking North America. Instead, there was something very interesting. There were fields and fields of corn and wheat that I had sketched and described. Very interesting indeed. So what? What does that mean? I did some more work, another 45 minutes, after a break, of course, of about 15 minutes. And then all of the pattern, all the picture emerged. The most secret project that the Chinese had was the following: a biological warfare vector, a biological warfare organism, a toxin that attacks wheat and corn, a virulent strain, a virulent toxin that attacks wheat and corn and spreads very, very rapidly. Remember now, the Chinese mostly eat rice. North Americans and Westerners eat lots of corn and wheat. So, essentially, their target was our food supply. If you can't eat, you can't fight. If you can't fight, you lose. It was actually a very brilliant strategy. So, I want to use that example, although there are many other examples. For instance, if one loses their pet cat, or their wallet, or their wedding ring, yes, in a matter of an hour, one can accurately describe where those things are. But there are other things one can do with remote viewing. The sky's the limit. There are no limits. This is something that I did, but it's something that you can learn how to do too. You can look ahead at your own life. You can look ahead at places to be, where not to be, where terrorists will strike, the safe zones in the world and nearby. And I would encourage you to learn this. It's a powerful tool and it will change your life forever. I'd like for you to remember, or don't forget, that remote viewing, that mind is outside of time. If one thinks of time as the fourth dimension, think of mind as the fifth dimension, looking down on this broad panoply of events in a person's life or in the history of a culture, civilization. It looks down on everything, all these events too. For one thing, remote viewing is a very interesting animal. What we're asking you to do is to allow your unconscious to solve a problem using a very structured technique that's been developed over the last quarter of a century. I can still remember, even though it's been a quarter of a century, how frustrated I was when I first began to learn remote viewing from the master, from the father of remote viewing, Ingo Swann. The frustrations arise because unconscious is being trained to solve a problem for you. This is your higher mind. Your higher mind is being trained to solve a problem for you using very systematic, very rigorous techniques. In the RV forums at rvcommunity.net, of course, you're going to see, as we see, some of the problems that newcomers to the skill experience. But we can get you over that hump pretty easily. I'd like to take this opportunity now to give you a few tips and to introduce a few things that may help you as beginners learn this tremendously valuable skill. Probably the biggest problem that new students to our skill experience or confront is something that we call analytical overlay. Analytical overlay, or AOL, is the biggest bugbear that one faces as a new student. In remote viewing, you're being trained to use your higher mind, your unconscious actually, to collect information and to pass that into your conscious awareness, and then objectify all of those percepts, objectify all of that information in as written words and sketches. As one proceeds through a remote viewing session, collecting information about a target being a person, place, thing, or an event, anywhere really in time, anywhere in time. As one proceeds through the session, there's a flow of information in a very structured way that we teach you. This flow of information, as it comes into conscious awareness from the unconscious or higher mind, is subject to a great deal of analysis. Analytical overlay really consists of two things in remote viewing. Number one, and it's the biggest one, as the data comes into conscious awareness from unconscious, it's subject to our egoic mind. Our egoic mind wants to take that data and bring closure to it right away. It wants to suss out or second guess what the strategy that unconscious has to solve the problem at hand. Let me give you an example. Let's say that in the early stages of collection gathering, that is in the first 5 minutes to 10 minutes of a remote viewing session, where we first contact the rudimentary, very primal contact with the target that leads us up to the very advanced target contact later, that you're getting percepts that you're downloading information about a target that describes it as long and yellow. Now, something that's long and yellow, of course, a conscious awareness is going to be looking at this. Your egoic mind is going to want to make sense out of that data. We're not trying to make sense out of any data in remote viewing until the end of the session. In fact, there's no thinking allowed. All you're doing is acting as a tool to download information until unconscious is finished with the remote viewing session. So let's say you get 2 data bits of long and curved and yellow. Well, your creative lower egoic mind may want to turn that into a banana. Well, if it's long and yellow, it must be a banana, right? This is a good example of analytical overlay. Again, your egoic, conditioned, lower conscious mind is trying to make sense out of the very pristine problem-solving strategy information that unconscious is delivering up to you. That's one side of analytical overlay. The other side of AOL is actual visuals. Remote viewing is to a great degree a misnomer. What we're doing is really remote perception. There's very little visuals involved in remote viewing. There are some, but we have to be aware of how to discriminate one from the other. That is, one type of visual is a very clear, while we're remote viewing, at any given time, the remote viewer may all of a sudden have an image, a clear, static, non-moving image of something. Not the target necessarily, but something. If that image like that pops up, it's always imagination. Always imagination. That again, that's an image that one can return to in one's mind's eye over and over again and describe it. That is always imagination. We know that from 25 years of experience. However, if an image, however fleeting, pops into your mind that's very blurry, it was there and it's gone, very fleeting image, that is almost always related to the target. So we save that information and we record it in ways that will be taught to you. Our job as remote viewers is to record the facts associated with the target or the facts associated with the solution to a problem. Our job is not to imagine and not to create. There is no creative license allowed in remote viewing. We lock onto a target and it's just the facts, man. Only the information connected with the target. Only the information that solves the problem that we've posed for ourselves. That's it. Imagination is not allowed at any point in the game. That's why we have to be able to manage it. Remote viewing is an attention management skill. We have to know what's fact. We have to know what's fiction. We have to know what's real. We have to know what's drama. You're taught how to do that in the Learn RV DVD course. Well, there is one important point though. It's impossible. It is impossible to keep AOL away. Even though in remote viewing, you're being taught not to think during the process. Thinking comes later during analysis and in the beginning when you set the problem up. But during the session itself, while you're playing the piano, during the session itself, there's a pace and a cadence. It's very important. It's very much like playing a piano, reading the notes. Consciously, when your conscious awareness is focused upon reading each one of the notes, and that is in terms of remote viewing protocol, following each one of the steps. There's no thinking involved. All you have to do is play the next note, the next note, the next note. Okay, take the next step and the next. It's all laid out for you. Your unconscious will do all the work. All you have to do is take dictation. Before we get into specifics, it's important to understand that I am not saying that you can close off imagination and shut down your egoic lower mind. It's still going to be working. There's no way to shut that out, but there's a way to recognize when it's operating and to manage it. Psychics can't do this. Remote viewers can. A psychic is not aware of when their imagination is starting to overlay and interfere with information about a target that they may be interested in. A remote viewer is taught to recognize when their lower egoic mind and their imagination is starting to crank and get involved in what the unconscious is trying to pass through to conscious awareness. So we teach you how to recognize when imagination is interfering with the signal, this hypothetical signal that emanates from a target or is associated with it. And we'll talk more about that later in terms of the theory of remote viewing. We teach you how to recognize when imagination is entering into the picture and how to deal with it. We give you very powerful tools to do that. Psychics don't have this, but remote viewers do. For those of you who already have the DVD course, you know that stage 1 is very rapid, very quick, and it gains an entree to the target. Stage 2 really is a construction of the doorway that gains us entry to the target. Stage 2 is important. Stage 2, unlike stage 1, which is very rapid and an entree to the problem at hand, stage 2 is scaffolding that leads us up to greater and closer contact with a remote target. This is where we're first confronted with AOLs. This is where we're first confronted with analytical overlay as a new student. As an instructor, I want to see my students correctly managing AOL. And of course we teach you how to do that, as Learn RV DVD students already know. If we don't see imagination in there somewhere, in stage 2, that is actually a red flag for us, because we suspect as teachers that imagination has infiltrated into the factual data connected with the target. It's important for the new student to recognize when analytical overlay is present and when it's not, and to be on the lookout for it. In fact, as we speak, I'm looking at a session by a new student who posted their session at rvcommunity.net. I can see that the new student has written down many of what they recognize and correctly as imagination as opposed to a very correct data associated with their target, very correct data describing the target's smells and taste and colors and sounds and motions and dimensions. But they've also listed all the things that imagination is trying to do to them. For instance, in terms of sensory impressions in stage 2, which make up the bulk of what stage 2 is, the textures related to the target that the student has perceived, textures such as hard, smooth, sharp, and I'm reading right from the session right now, black, shiny, and reflective, those are all correct. But then the student's imagination popped in and said, well, look, this hard, smooth, black, shiny, reflective thing, it must be a laptop computer. That's your mind trying, your egoic mind, trying to make sense and bring closure to this elemental data too. That's in the laptop computer in association with those particular stage 2 percepts is an example of AOL. It's the lower mind's attempt to analyze the data. This is actually analysis. And if you're analyzing the data, it means you're thinking, and there is no thinking allowed. You just play the next piano note and the next one and the next one. Do not stop. Stage 2 is a metronomic pace and cadence. Tick, 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 tick. 3 seconds, 3 seconds, 3 seconds. And the idea of laptop has nothing to do with the target at hand, nothing to do. Laptop is not associated at all with the student's target. Don't forget that the student's working against an unknown. The student is solving for an unknown. They have a practice training target that is completely unknown to conscious awareness. They are completely unaware of what this target is. It could be a mountain, it could be a river, it could be the Eiffel Tower, or the next terrorist attack against North America. So if they do their job correctly, they'll have the correct answer to the question that's been posed. But that requires that they recognize when imagination is starting to crank away in their session, and they have to be able to manage that. And that's what you're taught to do in the early stages of remote viewing. I'm looking at more student sessions posted at rvcommunity.net, and they're excellent. On the other hand, I'm looking at a few other sessions posted at rvcommunity.net where students are asking, are pointing out that there are no AOLs in their sessions and asking if that's a problem. Yes, it is. It is a problem. Because we can fear, as teachers, we know we can fear the worst. If their imagination, if there are no AOLs objectified, that is declared in a student session, then that means that probably imagination has insidiously worked its way in and into the factual data and hidden within the factual data associated with the target. It's going to use failed. In that case, the student still has not learned to effectively recognize when imagination is working away and interfering with this pristine, accurate data that unconscious is passing into conscious awareness. Unconscious is passing data, in stage 2 that is, to conscious awareness bit by bit by bit, percept by percept by percept. And these percepts come in 3-second increments. Okay. If the viewer, the new viewer, waits more than 4 seconds between each one of these percepts, that leaves the doorway open for imagination to come in. So to reiterate, it's important to recognize that a trained remote viewer is able to discriminate between their imagination and data associated with their target or the solution to a problem, because remote viewing is used for 2 things: to describe a remote target that's unknown or out of sight, and to be able to solve a problem, sometimes very technical, very detailed problem, because that's what this was designed to do. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you online in my cyber forums. And for those of you already in training, I know it's changing your world and changing everything about it. So, till next time, this is Major Ed Dames signing off.
If you'd like training in remote viewing from Major Ed Dames, please visit learnrv.com.